Hey, how you doing? So on this episode of The Real World, Do-It-Yourself, how to fix somebody else's drywall screw. Now we're in a bathroom here. This is a bathroom attached to the bedroom. Now our plumber's great, but he's not a drywall guy. And I'm finally in the mood to deal with this because it's got to be done. Oh, you can kind of, I'm not even sure how he attached this. You got to look at what's happened here without being distracted by the video camera taggy dealing. Okay, so it looks like, I don't know, there's no stud in here, so I don't know what this is really. Have to find out. In my situation, it looks like there's really only one fastener there, so we're going to find out. Alright, so as you can see, that's why there was only one screw. That's not going to cut it, especially in a moisture, high moisture environment as a bathroom, especially by the bathtub and the shower. Okay. So you've got your mechanism in here, there's your stud, the other one's over there, 16 off center. So I'm looking at this thinking, the other one's way over there. Your best bet on something like this is to, alright, we're going to cut a couple blocky pieces so that the torque of the drywall going against it. In other words, we're going to make it like a T or an E in this case. Alright, so we're going to cut one to that thickness here, measure the distance in from there to there, cut the next one that thick so there's no swivel point. And then as far as this goes, we're going to have to measure the distance between there to there in our 2x4 going across on the vertical side, not horizontal, but that way. We're going to dado in so that it wraps around this. We're going to measure in from that distance, make sure it doesn't go. That's actually probably what sticks out further. You have to measure to the part that is the closest to where your drywall is going to go. That's kind of obvious, but I'm just showing you. Not calling you a dummy. And then right there is going to be kind of tricky to mount it in, so we can either countersink it, like on the ceiling, or try to go in on a diagonal that way with a flushed head. But see, again, the issue is with the flex when you reattach your original piece of drywall. And I prefer to have like one going that way and one going that way. That's a lot of work, two pieces like that. So to do this right, you're looking at least 3 to 4 hours. Alright, we're going to measure and go cut wood and show you a quick little tip. It might be tempting just to go back to there, but you've got to watch out for the fitting. That's your widest part. So if you're stuck in a pinch, kind of like I just found myself, just put your tape right there and use your piece of paper that you are writing your dimensions on. And you find out exactly what it needs to be, which in this case looks to be 2 3/16. Now that's important because you want that as close to perfect, do it to the 9s, all of Marine Corps style, because otherwise your fastener will grab in there, and if it's not flush, the planes of each face, the drywall and your new mount point, or fastener point, it's going to like make that area that the fastener goes into concave. Now you could texture over it, sure, but why bother with that? This is complicated enough as it is for this rinky-dink area. Alright, and that's that. Yeah, part 4. Obviously, to fabricate what we need for this particular setup, you're going to need tools. If you don't have a table saw, then just stop right now. If you do, and you're like me, then you know to keep your scrap wood around. And here's the best piece I can find for the purposes of making these new mount points on this short side. Okay, but just a little saw safety tip reminder, you can't cut off something that's 3.5 and then rip it to match your dimensions on the saw. It'll kick back on the edge. Way too dangerous. Ideally, your piece has got to be at least 2/3 the length of your bench area. And this is a compact table saw that I have here, so best way to go about this is to do the least amount of work. I got 3.5 by 3 5/16. So that is 2. It's almost 3. So that's not going to work. That's not going to work in either direction. I got 3.5, and it'll work on the bottom piece. I'm going to have to find something else. Great. And that's what you got to find out. You know, what are your pieces that you have to work with? That 2 3/16 piece will work just fine. So basically, I got to rip this, you know, another whatever it is, 1/2 inch off down the table saw, and then dink, cut it off at 3 3/4 on your miter saw. And forgive the mess. I've been doing the one-man sports run lately, but I do recommend, you know, if you're working with wood as much as I do, you gotta find a way to stow it, because you never know when that one piece will come in handy. I had to build a cabinet over here in the corner of the garage for the express purpose of keeping all this spare wood around, because I've done a lot of work around here. Wish I'd been doing this show years ago. Okay, so that's part 4. And again, be careful with your, always be careful. The thing about, I'll never forget, my shop teacher had a hand like that. Go back to here, yeah. You know, he reached around and it pulled back, and you know, your brain will not react fast enough to let go, and bad things can happen. So part 5, just a quick reminder. You always want to mark that line right on your point. But don't forget the type of blade you have on, the width of the teeth, because they flare out every other one in opposite directions. So you've got to cut it on the outside of your line. That's always the rule. Because if you need to shave anything off, you'll have a little extra. If you go too far. Right. Step 6. I'm going to do just 1 so you understand, because it'll be replicated twice. Got my piece ready to go. The key to making this go faster, like this is fast at all, we're in a 5-hour job on a Sunday, fine, is to prefab everything, you know, like on a semi-line mass production. Alright, so we got our borehole here. You can see I used a spade to make the head flush again, like on the vaulted ceiling. I'm going to repeat it again. You're doing this sort of thing. Your fastener head has got to be beyond the point that your other piece is going to go up against, otherwise it's going to bow out right there. Now the problem is sometimes, because I cut up, I'll show you how to do this. Alright, so I took it in on an angle like so. But the screws I'm going to use are 3.5 inches, but they're not the biggest diameter. So the drill bits that will make it so that, you know, those will grab, these screws I just mentioned. They don't make them necessarily like 3 or 4 inches long. They're like this size. Which is only 3 inches. So you don't want to go too far in on your angle. Plus you have to remember that where it comes out is going to be further back. So you're trying to center it, basically. And you're going to have to probably score it. Now what do I mean by that? You're going to put it in where you want it to be. You're going to drill in there, and you're going to mark on your mount point where that is. You're going to have to pull this back out, continue drilling. Yes, I know it's labor intensive, but that way you'll get your your mount point and the fastener therefore to line up. Okay, here we are on phase 7. Remembering all the while, you know, that this is still stage 1, part 7. Okay, so I've got the pieces anchored. Now that one's pretty solid. But you can see how that one's sort of flexing around. Therein lies the problem with only one fastener. If it's not buttressed on all 4 sides, or even 3 sides, and only 2, it can sort of spin and pivot around, you know, like it's on a bearing. So when you anchor your drywall with that, this is going to be a spongy weak spot and it's going to crack. So what you got to do is you go in on an angle from this side, of course below where you drilled in, you know, flush. Of course it doesn't have to be flush on the stud here, and you don't want to drill into a load bearing wall anyway. So we're going to do that next, and then I'm going to show you, that was the easy part. Here comes the complicated part. Dado 2x4s to fit in around this area. Yeah. Nobody said it was fun. Hey, how you doing? We're on phase 8. But this is stage 2, so I'm going to call it phase 1. Lots of baseball and football action going on. But I kind of realize, and you may have to realize this too if you're like me, and you see a challenge, and it's hard to back away from it, and you look at the complicated side of things, again with the hiccups. You know the phrase, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, for yourself. All I needed to do was go vertical instead of horizontal that way. But I showed you the complicated way. But I slept on it, and you may want to consider doing that too. What we're going to do now is just like with the ceiling repair, put in our furring strips. I'm going to stagger it a little bit there because it's all one piece, so as long as it's centered, then the last piece will go down in the end. So your schematic, that being complicated is very important. And what I mean by that is, bring it back up for posterity's sake. Sorry. Pardon the shakiness. Okay, let's try this one more time. That's the whole idea behind this. Who wants to spend half a Sunday working on this sort of crap? I mean, it's one thing to do carpentry, you know, when you're in your 20s thinking, yeah, it would be cool if I had a daughter. I could build a dollhouse for her. The most kick-ass dollhouse. This sort of carpentry sucks. But that's why this is called the real world. Because if you don't do it, your plumber won't, as this whole segment started out, as I showed you. Anyway, enough said. Alright, so the distance there, 1 3/4 to where that width of the pipe is, that's what I cut the furring strips to. And then the 10 3/4 distance, I cut it 3/4 inch beyond. So you just got to mark off your halfway point with your furring strips. Which I've already done. And then you calculate, and you use your notes, your schematic, you calculate the math, all the fractions, going back to 6th grade, and you get the common denominator, and you end up with the distance between, from what the distance was from there to there, and what I would prefer to have cut these at, divide that by 2, boom. And you measure that distance on each line, and you're going to countersink it, which is good because drywall is a good adherence to a fastener the first time. So, and plus this is only 3/4 inch thick, so you use 1/2 inch drywall screws, you're good to go. Right. Phase 2 of part 2, or is it part 2 of phase 2? You take your pick. Alright, you see how I put the furring strips in, they're countersunk. It's helpful to be ambidextrous in this sort of an endeavor, because obviously you can't hold this left-handed and drill right-handed. It's better to go, if you're holding this in to countersink it, you're going to have to drill left-handed, because obviously there's my left thumb, I drilled that right-handed, and I'm filming right-handed. Left, right, left, okay, no silliness. Alright, so ideally at this point, all things being considered, and the reason you want to be able to countersink, use the furring strips as opposed to the complicated way I always do it, I'm glad I came to my senses, is you don't have to measure out exactly, you know, the pieces that go right, that you're mounting to your 2x4. Okay, so there's your original piece. We're going to close up. This is a close up? Yeah, you're done. Okay, so there's a little bit, it's pressing out a bit, but that's okay. You have to texture this in anyway. But it's not flexing out so much. Maybe like, that's more than I would have liked. That's because I didn't use the furring strip on this side. So don't do what I did in the first segment of this clip. Use your furring strip, because that way it's perfect. Over here, still sticking out a little bit. That's okay. You know, when you texture it, you gotta go out, you know, they say a foot on each side. You got a 2-foot strip. That's why when you look at our new house, the drywall strips, they're pretty wide. But this will work. Now you just gotta mount it into your new wood anchor points. Mark that off. The beauty of countersinking it is you don't have to mark it off again with a pencil. You can tell, because ideally you'll center line it, which I pretty much did in this case. You go 1, 1, and 1, 1, 1, and 1. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Not so bad. Take my hair down. I'm still staying in place. All right, final stages of stage 2. So you can see, you know, everything's back in. Now the original screw line my plumber did was right there. And now I'm just going to flex in this way or flex in that way, or you know, you would have been painting this wall again and again and again until somebody, well, we just got to take this out, blah, blah, whatever, right? So here's the whole point to the real world do-it-yourself. The attention to quality and attention to detail is something that your contractor may not do but charges you for it, or will do and charges you extra for it. So just better to do it yourself. You got the time, you're at home, like me, working from home, you got the time. Okay, the only little quirk is, interestingly enough, on the last segment, this was flexing out. This pretty flush. And right about here, it starts to press out. Like a 1/16 of an inch. Well, that's okay. You have the texture over this area anyway. The only reason I'm showing you this at this point, you take your painter's caulk in your tube on a finely cut line. Trying to see if I can keep the camera here. And away you go. You're just going to fill in all these lines and feather it out with your putty knife, which would be ideally about that size. And then you let it dry for a day, then you texture over it, boom, you repaint. Okay, we're done. Alright, thanks for watching. Happy fixing other people's screw-ups.